The 2023 NBA Draft Combine is in the books. The Wemby sweepstakes are over. Who helped themselves, who hurt themselves, risers, fallers. But also, what's it like to actually be in the room where it happens and see these young men up close and personal? Our guy Kyle Boone was there in Chicago, and he's going to fill us in.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a 5 days a week show where we bring you our favorite stuff from around the world of college basketball. Joining me today is our guy, Kyle Boone, college basketball writer there at CBS Sports. Fresh off of hanging out in Chicago. I think he actually just went and sat at the Bean all day and didn't watch any No, I'm just kidding. Was there in the room, managing the schedules, figuring it all out. And he is back here with us today to help bring us some insight on what happened, what he saw, what he experienced, conversations, all of that great inside stuff that you can only get from someone who was there. So, KB, I actually want to start before we get to the players and all of that side of things. I think so many people kind of hear the combine, and it's kind of growing. We're still not to the level of the NFL combine, obviously, but it is this kind of mysterious thing that I think a lot of people wonder about, right? So would you just start by taking us inside the room or rooms a little bit? Talk about the event and what you experienced there.
Yeah, so behind the scenes, and I guess maybe not so behind the scenes, but I don't want to start here by mansplaining, but I will say just off the top that people probably view the NBA combine in the same way that they view the NFL combine, which is definitely not the case at all. Most of the top prospects the last few years really just don't go, or they go and they don't do anything. So Victor Wembanyama is playing overseas still for Mets 92. He did not show up. Brandin Miller showed up, but did not participate in any of the drills or the measurements or any of the 5-on-5 stuff. Same for Scoot Henderson. And so the combine week turns into which fringe second rounder can play their way into the first round. That's kind of what it has devolved into. I think there's going to be a new CBA that will require players and prospects, from Victor Wembanyama level all the way down to, guys who are going to be second round or undrafted. Yes. To participate, and their participation will be required in order to be eligible to be drafted. Now, I don't know exactly what participation will look like, whether that's they have to play 5-on-5, I doubt it, or they have to do, agility and lane drills. Also, I doubt it. But I think there'll be some sort of participation required, and I think we'll see kind of, players, higher profile players in coming years, at least show up and do media and maybe some other things. So that's maybe just kind of in a nutshell what the combine is right now and kind of the state of things. So I think for the most part, the combine has mostly been about networking. It's about NBA teams. They'll watch these players. They'll watch them do the max vertical jump, the agility lane drills. They'll watch them do shooting. They'll watch them do pro days. They'll watch them do 5-on-5. But for the most part, I think the most important thing that NBA teams get out of the week, and I think one of the most important things that I got out of the week, was meeting people, talking about, decisions behind the scenes of, okay, is Terrence Shannon coming back, or is he going to stay in the NBA draft, or what's Oscar Tshiebwe going to do? Yeah. And it's just a very informal setting where everyone is, it's a huge gym, and you can walk in and spot, the sixth scout on the Pistons all the way up to Sam Presti taking notes in the front row. So it's a really informal, shockingly informal setting.
Interesting.
And kind of almost intimidating, right? Danny Ainge and Sam Presti just in the same room, just chilling with jeans on, So it's if you're going to go meet some people, it's a great place to go meet some people and kind of mingle. And I think that's kind of what NBA teams do. It's a good week to kind of catch up with people that maybe you haven't seen in a long time. And by the way, like some of these prospects are pretty interesting too, and we can talk about them, how they played, how their draft stock is either rising or falling. And so there's a lot of good intel gathering kind of both on and off the court.
Man, that's so good. And obviously, you talked about some of those decisions, guys like Oscar Tshiebwe, and that for us in the college basketball world is some of the more important things. Is it's like, hey, is our favorite college basketball player going to kind of not do well at the combine, so we get to see him again, right? And so that's always some of the interesting stuff. We've already seen some of that this week with Kevin McCullar coming back to Kansas, and so. Kyle, one of the other things that obviously is part of the combine is the lottery, which this year, for me at least, had a lot more intrigue than normal because of what you've been referring to for a long time now, was the Wemby watch or the Wemby sweepstakes. And so I think just that, like, man, let's get there, let's be number one hope of all these lottery teams probably made that a very intriguing scene. What did you get to experience as part of the lottery?
Yeah, it was a pretty surreal experience. I was so I've been in the draft lottery room, not the lottery room where they actually revealed the lottery picks, like, behind the scenes where Ernst and Young is like doing the thing. But I've been in the room where they actually reveal it to the public. So it's basically like the television product of the actual reveal. I was there in 2019, I believe it was, when the Pelicans won the lottery and got the rights to draft Zion. Wow. Everyone knew that was the Zion draft. And then I was there for last week when the Spurs won the lottery, and obviously everyone fully expects Victor Wembanyama to be the number one pick. So it was pretty surreal. There's a ton of tension in the room. It's a huge ballroom where some of the top players are there sitting, basically in a line near the front of the room. And I'm sure they're thinking, okay, well, Pistons got the number 5 pick. That means I'm going number 4 to, okay, the Rockets got the number 4 pick. Maybe I'm going to the Rockets. So you can see kind of almost in real time some of these prospects probably processing, like,
who's my boss now?
Yeah. And so that is fascinating to me. I like to stand up kind of in the back of the room. I try to record just because it is very difficult to process what's happening as it's happening. It goes fairly slow. It's a slow process, and I think that's part because of it's a TV product.
Sure. Yeah.
But it still flies by because you almost black out. Like, just the stakes of knowing, like, holy cow, one franchise is about to, like, earn millions and millions and millions of dollars in value just from, like, some ping pong balls falling in their direction, right? So that was cool. I mean, like, the lottery went mostly according to statistical likelihood until number 5, the Detroit Pistons, who had the worst record in the NBA last season. They get the number 5 pick. There's some in the room where people are like,
That's
oh
great.
My goodness, like, wow, what does that mean? Which means, like, that Portland is suddenly in the top 4 and in the mix to potentially win the lottery. The Rockets, the Spurs are still in it. The Hornets are still in it. And so they're doing the countdown, and then the Rockets get the number 4 pick. And I think probably on TV they probably showed Ime Udoka reacting to, or not reacting to it, because it was mostly like just a 1,000-yard stare where he's like, well, this sucks, It's like, but there's, just like the tension slowly building up, and then they go to number 3, and it's the Portland Trail Blazers. And then it hits the final 2 teams, right? It's like, the Hornets and the Spurs sitting up there at the top. Who's going to win the number 1 pick and the rights to draft Victor Wembanyama? So that tension in the room just slowly crescendoing and building to a point where it's like, man, like, you could hear a pin drop. It's just, like, very tense. People are just sitting on the edge of their chairs. In fact, like, people who are sitting in chairs are literally standing up because, like, just everyone wants to know, like, you cannot contain yourself. And so that was cool. And then you get, I think they bring out the envelope for the number 2 pick, and before they even announce it, Peter John Holt, who's I think the chair of the Spurs Entertainment sees that it's the Hornets logo. And so he's like, whoa, he's pumped because he knows by process of elimination, his Spurs just won the lottery. And so he afterwards he talked to the media and talked to us and said, I think I probably jumped the gun and I had to apologize to Mark Williams because I may have spit on him and he just couldn't contain himself. I think he had a truly out of body experience. And obviously the Spurs had a great chance to win the lottery, compared to some of the other teams, but it's still a 14% chance. That is not a lock to win the lottery. And in part because, they did a flattened odds system several years back where, right, the worst teams have a worse chance of winning the lottery. It's still very likely compared to other teams, but 14% is still feels pretty slim. So that was cool to see the Spurs kind of react and just total euphoria. It sounded like Jason Wright, who's the GM, basically had not ate all week, just nervous in anticipation of a potentially huge night for the franchise. And just to see whether or not Wembanyama becomes the greatest NBA player of all time, who cares? It's just the idea and the hope that winning the lottery and what it means to be able to be first in line to draft whoever you want, to be able to draft Victor Wembanyama is really cool to see. And the Spurs brass there in Chicago, just totally on top of the world. I mean, just Spurs smiles all around. It was one of those Ricky Bobby, I don't know what to do with my hands type moment where they're just so pumped. And it gives me goosebumps thinking about it just because trying to put yourself in that situation, it's crazy. I'm not a Spurs fan. So it's just, if you put yourself in their shoes, it's crazy to think that those people's lives changed probably forever. Just because some ping pong balls fell away.
Woof. That is an experience, Kyle. Thank you for regaling that moment and what it means for the Spurs. If I'm Greg Popovich, I'm looking for about a 10-year contract extension. You're gonna have to wheel me out on a gurney or something. Yes. Man, great stuff for them. And it's in a year where you don't really, some years there's pressure with the first pick, man, who's it going to be? And this one, it's all right, well, who are we going with in the second round? Because you got it all squared away. Well, we do want to look at who are these players that are going to get drafted? Who did Kyle see that helped themselves last week? Who did Kyle see that maybe did the opposite of helping themselves last week? We'll look at all that in just a second. But first, I need to tell you that today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Bird Dogs. We're moving into summer season and short season, and I just got a couple pairs of Bird Dog shorts myself for the first time. Usually I'm kind of whatever with shorts, but with Bird Dogs, I actually look forward to wearing them because I love how they feel. I love how I look in them. They're very comfortable. They've got this stretchy fabric and this liner. Oh man, I feel like I could go swimming in them or something like that. Well, I also love Bird Dogs because they work in several environments. You could make them really formal. Kyle could walk into CBS Sports headquarters rocking his Bird Dogs and he'd be okay. Or he could take his wife on a real nice date and it would all work out because Bird Dogs are versatile. They're also really practical. I get hot. My wife calls me a furnace, but the liners, they help keep me really cool and just focused on what I'm doing and not sweating to death. So if you want to feel the same as I do, go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege. And when you enter promo code lockedoncollege, they'll throw in a free custom Bird Dogs Yeti style tumbler with every order. I'm drinking out of mine literally right now. You can see it if you're watching on the YouTubes. Folks, go check out Bird Dogs. Get yourself a pair. You will not be disappointed. All right, coming up next week on the show for you everydayers, Andy and I will be right back with you, continuing to unpack draft decisions, who's coming back, who's staying in, all of that great stuff will be with us on Monday. So Folks, Kyle Boone, CBS Sports, is joining us today as he so often does. He's had a ton of content up on cbssports.com following the draft combine, so make sure you go check out all of that great work, including a draft combine winners and losers article. His most recent big board dropped on Wednesday, I believe it was, with 75 players, and so great stuff. And we want to just utilize and bounce off some of that content right now. So Kyle, let's start with who are some of your combine winners and why do you see them as such?
Yeah, just off the top, there's two that definitely come to mind. Two who played really well in the scrimmages on day one and decided to shut it down. It was Tristan Vucevic, no relation to the other Vucevic in the NBA. They actually spell their names like slightly differently.
Yeah.
And Omax Prosper from Marquette. I think both of those guys did really well in the scrimmages on day one, so well that they just decided, hey, like, it's only down from here. Like, we played really, really well. Vucevic, had a stretch where I think he reeled off like 10 straight points. He's 7 foot tall. He plays in the Adriatic League overseas, a little bit of an unknown, I think, on the NBA draft scene, but I think definitely improved his draft stock. Someone who I think probably this audience in particular, the college basketball audience, isn't too familiar with. Obviously, didn't play college basketball, but definitely a big riser, I think, in Chicago last week. And then Prosper from Marquette, obviously. Good size, really good athlete, definitely flashed this past season, had a career season for Marquette, and Marquette was, one of the most fun, engaging, exciting offenses in college basketball. He was a part of that for sure. Added a ton of just like energy, great effort, great attitude, like a guy who kind of just a foxhole guy, like you definitely want on your side. And I think the first scrimmage, he had like 21 points and like 7 rebounds. Was very efficient, just affecting the way the game was played kind of on both ends. And the athleticism is there and was expected to be there, but his impact on both ends was kind of a surprise. So those two guys to me stood out in a big way. Prosper, to me, I think has played his way into the first round conversation.
Wow.
Which was not what I expected coming into the combine. He was on the CBS big board at 48 or something. So I think he's like late 20s in our latest rankings. So that's a reaction from Chicago, not only from me and what I saw, but I think kind of the general reaction from the draft community too. He played his way up and did really well for himself.
Yeah.
Amari Bailey and Brandin Podziemski would be the other two that I would mention here as possible winners. Bailey was, a 5-star guy who went to UCLA last season. That team was obviously very old and experienced, and they had a ton of pieces that, he didn't have to come in and be the dude right away. But Bailey had 14 assists in 2 of his scrimmages combined. A lot of turnovers, but a lot of like playmaking chops that we really didn't get to see at UCLA. So that was impressive. And then Podziemski won co-WCC Player of the Year last season alongside Gonzaga's Drew Timme. Answered some questions about some athleticism, had, like a 40-inch max vert, which was really impressive and totally unexpected. Looked really comfortable playing in the scrimmages.
Like one of just like 4 players that had a 40-inch or more, right? If I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I may be stretching. I think it was like 39 and a half.
Okay.
But
round up. It's good.
Yeah. I like to round up. I like to give guys benefit of the doubt. I think probably his heels, the heels of his soles were maybe just a little shaved off. So if they were normal, I think it would have been 40 inches. That's just my opinion.
Yes.
So yeah, there was a lot of guys who I thought really impressed and stood out. Seth Lundy, Ben Shepherd, a lot of guys who I think, maybe not like headline names in this draft, guys who, were definitely like first round, no doubt about it, lottery picks, but definitely some guys who, had they not played, would maybe, I think, probably be in the mid to late second round or maybe an undrafted conversation, who now I think are in the mix to be, first round picks and maybe even higher, just after a really good week in Chicago.
Well, and it's so interesting. I mean, how good must that feel for a guy like Omax Prosper to be like, I played so good on day
Yeah.
one that I'm just going to shut it down because I know I'm where I need to be. Like, I can't imagine the feelings that engenders inside of a human being.
Yeah.
Like, that's just something that I will never experience, but so happy for him now.
Yeah.
That has some very negative ramifications for Shaka Smart, obviously, because
Mhm.
a lot of us have projected Marquette as a top 5 team for next season, based in large part on getting essentially everyone back. And so, as it's been trending this way of losing Omax, it is going to open up a conversation of reevaluating what Marquette will be next season. But really neat stuff for them. And Kyle, I love to see a second straight year of a Santa Clara product kind of
Yeah.
popping, as you said, with Podziemski. Is there something in the water out there at Santa Clara? What's going on?
Yeah, I don't know. Jalen Williams last year played in the combine, ended up being a lottery pick, was someone who was really efficient throughout the season at Santa Clara and caught the eye of NBA evaluators, but I don't think was on the radar as a lottery pick. And the Thunder go up and get him. I think it was at number 12. Guess who has the number 12 pick in this year's draft? The
I think it.
Thunder. The Thunder. I don't think Podziemski's going at number 12, but yeah, Podziemski like definitely helped his draft stock. He's a guy who was a former 4-star recruit, Mr. Wisconsin basketball, signed with Illinois out of high school, and then Illinois, like basically as soon as he joined that program, 2 fifth-year guys decided to come back for another year, and it's like, well, this is maybe not going to go so well. And it didn't. He didn't get a lot of opportunities to kind of show himself, and then goes to Santa Clara. Jalen Williams, I'm told, like helped recruit him to Santa Clara. Basically said like they'll give you the keys to the car and you can drive as fast as you want. And he did whatever he wanted. He played on and off the ball. He looked like one of the best pure shooters in college basketball last season, was the co-player of the year in the WCC. And yeah, like everyone knows he can shoot. Everyone knows he's got like a Manu Ginobili skill set, and the comfort with which he played at the combine, I think, just kind of solidified his standing as a like a really underrated prospect who, like I have him in the 20s. I can see him going, somewhere between like 25 and 35, but wouldn't surprise me at all. Like he played so well, and I think his athleticism is actually real. People are very high on Podziemski, and I think he did well for himself at the combine.
Man, that's great news. Always like that's what we're in this for, right? Is to celebrate these guys and what they're doing, and to hope all the good hopes for them and their future. So best to all of these guys.
Yep.
Now, unfortunately, there are some players and maybe some institutions that didn't show themselves so well at the combine, either because of how the ping pong balls fell or other things. And so we want to get Kyle's takes on who might have hurt their stock a little bit, or what franchises are in worse shape than they thought they'd be. We'll close out the show talking about that in just a second. All right, we are joined today by Kyle Boone from CBS Sports, who was in the building last week at the NBA Draft Combine. We've just been talking about some young men who have really helped themselves from their performance at the Combine. Kyle, let's flip the can upside down and see who might be trending in the opposite direction that maybe we thought was higher, or maybe some of the institutions of the week that didn't show themselves as well as perhaps they should have.
Yeah, this one's always really tough. It's easy to identify winners and just be like, oh, wow, Amari Bailey did great. Seth Lundy did great. Ben Shepherd did great. But then you go to losers and it's like, man, losers is such a harsh word. Like I can't just be like, oh man, well, this player sucks. They're a loser.
Right.
So within that context, I will politely say that there's some players who maybe didn't perform as well as expected, or, maybe they didn't test as well. 2 players that stood out to me, Kevin McCullar from Kansas, former Texas Tech star. He had I thought, an okay combine showing, but in the scrimmage setting, he really made some mistakes in terms of turnovers. His shot, I think, is still a work in progress.
Yeah.
His defense is fantastic. I remain a very, very staunch Kevin McCullar believer. I think he could be a first rounder, but it won't be this year. I think maybe next year. He has another year at Kansas, will develop more as a shooter. His defensive versatility, his rebounding, I think really will mesh well with that Kansas team, who, by the way, like might be the best team in college basketball next season. So he'll be able to showcase himself with Jalen Wilson gone, I think, in a big way. And so probably not the best week for him at the combine, and he's already announced he's coming back to Kansas next season. I think that's a good move, and I'm excited to see kind of his development over the next year. Zach Edey is another one who he did not compete in the 5-on-5 setting, so we don't know exactly like how he would have fared, but his testing was just okay. Obviously, his measurements were fantastic. You know, he's like 8'5" without shoes, and his wingspan actually he just has to like reach and he can touch the rim. So that was good for him. But his athletic testing, I think his like max vert was the lowest of anyone who tested at the week. So not totally surprising. You know, this is a guy who doesn't really rely on athleticism. He just relies on being totally massive and using his size to his advantage. I thought he actually looked pretty well at he had a pro day in Chicago, and it was pretty interesting. Him and Ryan Kalkbrenner were both in that same pro day workout and grabbing, you know, basically they do a drill where they throw the ball off the backboard, grab the rebound and dunk it. And Edey's just like throws it and then just kind of reaches. He doesn't even really have to dunk. So that's like kind of just jarring to watch. But Edey showed some stuff. Like he showed off some 3-point range. He missed, I think I counted like 7 in a row, and I'm like, oh, well, why is he doing this? And then he made like 7 in a row. I'm like, oh, okay. Like showing some stuff here. So he had some shooting touch that I like totally didn't expect.
Well, because he doesn't need to do that at Purdue, right? We just haven't seen it.
Yeah. And so this guy like notoriously is like one of the best paint players in college basketball. He's very efficient shooting around the rim, but he's not really asked to step out and shoot and be a floor spacer. But a guy who I think has clearly been working on his shot, his outside shot, and showed, I think, some impressive things. Look at me, by the way, just like calling out 2 losers and then immediately just gushing about how I'm excited about their improvement. God, I'm so soft. I'm so soft. But
no, I mean, it's legit. Like, it's like that's what this process is about, is learning. Am I ready right now? Or is there a hole in my game or a swing skill that I really need to continue to work on? And if so, oh, darn, I guess I'll go back and be part of one of the best teams in all of college basketball and be in front of millions of eyeballs 36 times next. You know what I mean? Like, and that's true for both of these guys. We obviously don't know if Edey's coming back yet or not, but man, I sure hope he does. And what could he do in another season there in the paint for Matt Painter? And you just went there and it was just sitting there, Matt Painter. But would love to see that. And maybe with Ryan Kalkbrenner too. Do you get the sense from what you saw from both Edey and Kalkbrenner of what they will ultimately decide to do between staying in or coming back?
I don't. And I asked them both at the combine, like, hey, what are you doing? You know, just point blank, you know, because it's like, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. Like, just tell me what you're doing. And you could say, like, you could give me a stock canned answer, and that's fine. And Edey mostly gave me that, you know, because we talked a little bit about Purdue scheduling a game in Canada versus Alabama, which was basically like a, you know, it's a way I think of Purdue saying like, hey, love to have you back. We'll play a game in Canada with you. And I think that's actually pretty enticing to him. Like, obviously he's not going to come back to college just because he gets to play, you know, in his native country.
No.
But I think that was appealing to him. My guess is he comes back to school. If he doesn't, though, like, it wouldn't totally surprise me. I think there will be a team in the second round who would be willing to take a chance on him just because he's so dominant at the college level. Like, what if he's actually as dominant or even close to as dominant in the NBA as he is in college? Like, good luck like passing on that at like 48 or something. Like that would be pretty tough to pass on. And Kalkbrenner, I feel like, is my guess is he's probably gone. Like, I think generally the NBA evaluators are a little bit higher on Kalkbrenner and kind of how his game will translate. He's shown in college that he can be a floor spacer. He's
Right.
got a pretty good smooth shot. His defense is obviously fantastic. Creighton last season was like clearly better when he was on the floor and healthy. So I think his impact on both ends of the floor is pretty appealing. Like I'm not sure he's a guy who's going to be in the first round, but someone who I think like the early 30s would make a lot of sense for an NBA team looking for a developmental big who has, I think, a ton of upside.
Yeah. And an opportunity to carve out a nice little career for himself
For sure.
in the best basketball league in the world. And folks, if you're not aware, we are closing in on that final day of being able to make those decisions of whether to come back to college or stay in the NBA draft. For those who are confused by it, because there are two different deadlines, it's the earlier one, the NCAA deadline, that these players will have to abide by if they do want to come back to school. So keep your eyes on that because it's coming up midweek next week. KB, great stuff as always, brother. Thank you so much for joining us. Hope all your draft content keeps rolling along. And folks, please, once again, make sure you go check out all of Kyle's great work on CBS Sports, and make sure you check out that new Twitter handle, Kyle the Boone. You love it and you love to see it. Kyle, have a great weekend. Can't wait to catch up with you again soon. Thanks so much for being on.
Okay, Isaac, thanks for having me on. Shout out Andy, who I missed at the Combine last week on recording. That's on me. We'll have to do it again. And also, if you're
honestly, it's on the NBA and their scheduling. Let's be honest about that.
Yeah, it's fine. If you're interested in our NBA draft coverage today, go to cbssports.com. My big board is up there. I'll have a new mock draft that will drop on Friday. So excited about that. Thank you all for watching. Guess we'll catch you soon.
Yes, indeed. Folks, please, if you would go leave us a review on iTunes, 5 stars. Would love to hear why you love the show, why you love when guys like Kyle Boone are on. Don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and leave some comments. As always, apologies to the lawyer family. Go Wildcats. And until next week, peace.